Hello, my name is Irrelevant. I've made political content in varying capacities for well over a decade now. However, I never thought that I would have to make content in a manner such as this that would obscure my identity. We are heading for disaster. Everyone around my everyday life, for the most part, keeps a silence, a certain type of silence, about the world's happenings around them. In fact, I only see the loud Donald John Trump, MAGA cultist types ever making any noise at all. Loud celebrations of debaucherous behavior or sharp sneering jabs at anyone who may be even slightly suggesting criticism towards the current regime. I suppose there is a good chance you are like me. You have seen this hatred permeate from every facet of your everyday life in the past year or so. You can't escape it, you can't breathe. It wasn't always like this. In fact, this is a pretty new development. A decade ago, this world was pretty different. It was the last dying gasp of a sense of order, the last chance to correct the course before it was too late. The world seemed somewhat easier to interact with. I didn't see people walk around with political t-shirts. Well, at least not when it made any sense to. The previous sectors that I had worked in were generally blue-collar and always heavily Republican. I remember even then finding it strange that these people were often union protected, fully understanding the concept of collective bargaining rights, however were so carelessly voting against their own interests with each and every Republican politician elected. Yes, the left was not without its issues, the outlandish tanky types growing insanely popular with Gen Z, the never-ending sense of feeling as if you had to constantly modify your language, even if you were trying your best to be an ally because you know in your own heart that you're a good person, but you're absolutely terrified of it being decided for you that you're a bad person. Focuses on issues were broader. There were always wedge issues, certainly. Cannabis reform, LGBT marriage rights, healthcare, etc. All in all, the 2015-2016 presidential campaign was the last hideous mark in the sort of shadow oligarchy system. It was the only time in history Donald Trump looked more trustworthy than his opponent. But that was only because we never saw a DJT presidency yet. The canvas was fresh, the paint was his words, his mind and mouth the brush. Do you think he would have been defendable back then if he had advocated for concentration camps with statistically designed alligator moats? No. He wouldn't have been able to shake the Yahtzee allegations. They would have likely stuck and he would have never been able to convince anyone anything else. An agenda is an agenda for a reason. These aren't things you walk up to bat right away with. Being a monster is easy. Anyone can do it. Being a predator, that takes patience. And our president has ample experience. You don't drop the whole script in front of people on day one. You can't just say you hate people and want them gone. But what you can do is convince people over time that these people don't bring their best, that they only bring their felons, their murderers, or criminal enterprises. You manufacture a crisis in this way, bit by bit, and then you take baby steps towards the true goals. 10 years ago, we had a problem with illegal immigration. We always have. This is nothing new. However, in my youth, this was prosecuted as a crime. MAGA cultists like to point to the fact that Obama, Biden, and other Democratic presidencies saw large numbers of deportations, which is a true specialty with these MAGA reactionaries, is that they like to say things that are true, but are also dishonest. What I mean is certainly yes, people got deported before Trump, but they were found guilty of crimes. They were specifically targeted for that reason. They went through a due process of law which found them guilty. Today, suspicious masked men walk towards anyone not noticeably Caucasian and ask for documentation. And if you resist, whether or not you're a citizen, they'll escalate. Then they'll immobilize you. And then from there, who knows? 10 years ago, we didn't build deportation colonies. We didn't have an alligator Alcatraz, a place where over 1,500 people are still missing, unaccounted for. That's like the entire population of a medium-sized high school, gone overnight. Life in public was different, especially in a working sense. Let me get somewhat personal here. 10 years ago, I was 19 or 20 years old and working in the automotive sector. What I didn't know for a long time was that my boss was secretly a white supremacist. My mother is of an ethnicity that I don't wish to state. However, what I can say is that they are generally despised. I have always been pretty open about my mixed up background, and people are allowed to make whatever conclusions they'd like of me. Well, one day I was working that job and I must have finally gained the approval of this boss, so he added me to some sort of work-orientated group chat. I was the only worker at the time who was not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. When I was added to the group chat, I realized I could see message logs from before the time I was added to this chat, beyond the whole 6 months that I had been working there even. And then I found out my boss at the time was calling me slurs, pejorative terms, whatever he could throw, basically, towards my identity. Whenever I'd mess up, whenever there was a mishap, or whenever he needed to get anger out. And it felt very depersonalizing. Well, present day, I work in a different type of field. This boss I have, he's younger than me, 24, the same age that the boss I had in the car shop was. The only difference is that this time I am older than him. The dynamics are different. I'm no longer younger, looking up and staying quiet. I'm older, mentally looking down and making judgments while having my other face on. This boss is too racist. This boss says he doesn't deal with black people. This boss says racial slurs in front of staff, white or minority, with no care. Nobody says anything because everyone is afraid to speak up. And here's the point I'm making. 10 years ago, my racist boss still felt like he needed to hide in the shadows. He only said these things to people he knew were on the same belief systems as him, or those in which he possibly thought they would be on the same belief systems. Today, my boss is just racist, openly, unabashedly, proudly displaying this fact even, confidently saying slurs next to people of that same group. We are all sharing the awkwardness in that moment. We look at each other in mutual understanding that we are being reminded in that moment that this is a white person's world. We sigh a bittersweet sigh of relief as we all know we are on this boss's good side. We are the quote-unquote good ones, whatever this is supposed to mean. Yet we both know it's a lie. We are all just playing nice because we have to. For now. The structure has changed. The racist is no longer the small guy. The one bad statement can ruin your career, your working legacy. It's now normalized. Now to be a racist is the norm. To cheer on the state-sanctioned death of innocent civilians is the new norm. To them it's a cruel world, and instead of becoming a beacon, turning the darkness into warmth and light and salvation, you must abandon your human thoughts and feelings, your communal sense of order and nature. You must become aggressive, rabid, frenzied, and you must strike with all of your might immediately, then later ask the questions. 10 years ago, the biggest internet dramas were small-time YouTube drama accounts. Sometimes you'd see something a little more shocking. Now, if these younger ones aren't addicted to Nick Fuentes content, they're probably neck deep in Hassan content. There's no more compromise, ever. It's a foreign concept. It left the American political system long before Trump's arrival. 10 years ago, I could exist as me 100% of the time without fear of being seen. I didn't have these notions made about me because of who I happened to be. I was judged for the actions that I did, for my actual personality in real life, or just general things on an individual level. Now I must be this or that, or I must have a good sense in this topic because of ancestry, or I am made to answer for things, or even explain things on behalf of my ancestors, which these white people don't give a shit about anyway. 10 years ago, threatening to annex other nations was unthinkable. It wouldn't happen here in the States. It would be seen as an open declaration of war, because it is. 10 years ago, people had a real sense of consequences. 10 years ago, people had a sense of the world around them. 10 years ago, people didn't have to walk through life with two masks.